Hi, and welcome back to my weekly sky practice demo, where I just kind of show you how I do my sky practices, which I try and do on a sort of daily basis, whether or not it's part of another painting. I try and paint a sky a day just to try and stay in practice and to find new ways of creating beautiful watercolour effects, and to practice and try and sort of progress further with my watercolour skies. So today I'm using a new colour that I really like, and so I'm using it for nearly everything at the moment, and it's Jackson's own brand Artist's Quality Paint in the colour Cobalt Violet Deep Hue, and it's really beautiful. And here I'm using it mixed with Payne's Grey and Indigo to lesser or greater amounts over an initial wash of raw sienna to try and create a really stormy sky. I'm just going to try and see if I can use this purple colour, this violet colour, to paint a sky and see what happens. So I'm finding it a little bit different to work with, because I'm used to working with browns and blues and greys more than anything for my skies. So I think if you're trying something new, don't be tentative, just go for it. After all, it is an experiment. There's nothing to lose except a piece of paper and a bit of paint, really. So you might as well sort of, if you're trying something new or a new colour, push it as far as it'll go in your painting and see what happens. So here my board is at my usual angle of about 45 degrees, and you can see that the paint's running down the page now towards the horizon line, which I haven't fully established yet, but you can see it's running down and starting to look like distant rain on the horizon, with this ominous cloud that's blowing in. So this is slightly richer Payne's Grey that I'm adding to my clouds just to build up some shadow. Everything will dry back a lot softer and a lot lighter than this. So remember when you paint, that if it looks right on the page, then it isn't right. When it's wet, then it isn't right, because it will dry back a lot lighter. So when you apply it, you want it to look a little bit darker than you like, and that way you can gauge that it will dry back to the colour that you're looking for, or the shades or the hues. Now I'm using a size 14 Escoda Ultimo synthetic mop brush to paint my sky, and it's really good because I can use it to apply the paint to soften back and create nice soft and hard edges. I'm leaving some of the white of the paper showing through here and there, not too much, but enough just to give me a few hard edges, and then cleaning out my brush, dabbing out all the water onto a cloth so it's only damp, and using it to soften back my richer areas of paint. Now this is another synthetic brush. This is my Cotman one-stroke synthetic flat brush, and I find it quite useful just to lift out paint so that I can create some softer clouds, some sort of softer edges here and there. Everything's still wet on the page, even though I painted it wet paint onto dry paper. Now that the sky is covered, then this is now a wet in wet painting. So I'm working quickly, establishing my horizon line, and then my sea, and eventually my beach, just using my Pro Art Ron Ranson Harkey brush simply across the sea. When I'm doing a sky practice, more often than not, I will paint a sea underneath, because I live by the sea, so I'm very used to painting it, and I don't have to think too much about the sea. I can focus completely on the sky, but it helps me if I have some sort of landscape or seascape below my sky. It helps me to work with the sky it gives it some context, if you see what I mean. Now this is just a bit of paper towel and pulling out just some extra light just before the paint dries. It's very gently. If you go in too hard with the paper towel onto a wash like this, you'll lift off all the paint back to a dry page, and you don't want that. You want just to softly touch it and just bring out a few very subtle lights so that you kind of leave the dark shadows underneath, and it gives everything a bit more body. So I'm using exactly the same colours for the water and for the beach as I used in my sky. So that's Cobalt Violet Deep Hue, the Jackson's paint, and Cotman Payne's Grey and Indigo. And I'm lightening it up across the horizon and using my flat brush to establish a nice straight horizon. The reason I'm lightening it up is because I'm going to go in and darken it up later. Now that might not make sense now, but when I paint it later, I've got this idea that once the first washes have dried, I can use masking tape to get a nice clean horizon line and then put in a sort of very dark, ominous looking sea across a colour sort of reflecting that oncoming storm and cloud. So I'm going to add in some more darks and texture across my beach. So again, using my 3/4 inch Cotman flat brush. And now this is just an old painting. I'm laying it across my sky. This is called soft masking. And now I'm going to flick some water into the sea and the beach area just to kind of, I don't know, give it a bit of a lift at the moment. I'm not too happy. It's a bit static. It's a bit flat. So the water will create little blooms that I can then work with and begin building up a bit more of a beach area across the front. And now that I've loosened up that area with those flicks of water, I can go in with a tissue and just sort of move the paint around a little bit. And then I'm going to use the corner of a plastic card. You could use a palette knife for this, but corner of a plastic card to create some little bits of beach texture across the very bottom. I think I need to darken up the bottom, and while I could just paint water, I think I just want a little bit of beach across sort of across the bottom left part of the sky, because I think that will just balance out my composition a bit more. I've got a nice bit of dry brush bottom right, so balancing that up with some texture I think will help the composition. And you can see how scraping with the card has revealed paler parts of paper with the darker paint that I've pushed away with the card around the edges. And then I can go back in with Payne's Grey on my flat brush and establish shadow underneath and around the rocks to help to sort of bed them into the beach. And then that was a bit of the raw sienna added into the lighter parts of the rocks, just so there's a bit of this light underneath the storm clouds that's reflecting off the wet stones on the beach. And I think I'm just about happy with that. The sky's drying really nicely. I think the sea balances out with it as now that I've put the beach in, so I'm going to leave it to dry completely. So I've left it for a few hours and it's completely dry. It has to be dry if you're going to do this. And now I'm taking a piece of my masking tape and I'm carefully placing it above my horizon line, but with the bottom edge right on the horizon line, making sure it's nice and flat and that it's pressed down really well where it meets the sea, because I don't want the sea, the darker colour for the sea that I'm going to put in, to leak up into the sky underneath the tape. Now using my flat brush, I'm using, and over the area that I lightened up considerably, I'm now applying a glaze of the Cobalt Violet, seeing if I can just build up some subtle shade. It might have to be darker than this, in which case I'll have to do this process twice, but I shall see how it looks. While it's drying a bit, I'm going to add in a few darks across that light area, just with the tips of the flat brush, just to balance things and bring the sea forward a little bit and push it back to the horizon too. And then while I'm at it, I'll get some more darker shadows underneath the rocks on the beach. So it's a balancing act now. I'm trying to sort of balance the sky and the land whilst keeping the sky as the main part of the painting. So trying to get enough detail in the beach and the sea, but without overpowering the sky, if you see what I mean. I think when you're painting a landscape or a seascape, one part has to be dominant and the other has to be quite quiet, if you see what I mean. If it's a sky painting, the sky should dominate. If it's a landscape, then the landscape should dominate. If both are really, really busy, then it becomes a confusing painting. Now I've removed the masking tape and I don't think that's dark enough actually. It hasn't quite given me the impact that I need. However, that's not a problem because with glazes you can build them up slowly but surely. You just have to leave it to dry completely and then go back again, which is what I'm doing now. I've replaced my masking tape and I'm now using a much darker mixture. I realised that it needs to go really dark in order to balance things up properly. So hopefully this time this glaze will work well. When I remove the masking tape, I'm really hoping to get that storm shadow on the distant water. So I'm applying this darker paint over the tape, so I should get a nice clean line when I take the tape off. And I'm not putting too much of this dark paint on. I want to leave a lot of the light sea that I created in front of that line of dark paint, so that I do get the idea that the storm is over the horizon, but it's coming towards us. So moment of truth, let's see. And yeah, I think that's much better. That's more or less what I wanted. And I hope you can see the difference that that darker strip of paint has made. It's really brought the painting together. And I think I just need to take out a tiny bit of paint on the right so that the darker mark is sort of more central underneath where the main rainstorm is occurring. And I think that little adjustment really helps. So I'm going to call this sky practice finished. I've really enjoyed working with this new colour palette, which is sort of quite dominated by this beautiful purple colour, which is Jackson's own brand Cobalt Violet Deep Hue, and I really like it. I think it works really well with my existing palette and enhances it. I'm quite happy with the way these clouds have turned out, and I'm happy with the sea now that I've got that horizon line right. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching that, and I hope you enjoyed watching how I used glazes on the horizon, 2 of them, to build up that lovely dark contrast between the sea and the sky. So if we zoom in a bit closer, you can see the way having the board at 45 degrees and just allowing that paint to run down to the horizon line has given us that distant storm effect quite effectively and quite easily in this loose painting. So if you like watching sky practices and are interested in that yourself, then I have a playlist for sky practices, and I'm going to be trying to paint one every week. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my wonderful Patreon group who support this channel, and I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.